And this board includes representatives of federal legislative and executive authorities, heads of public organizations cooperating with the foundation, legal professionals and entrepreneurs. It will be about strengthening the effectiveness of the fund in the face of new challenges and challenges created by the West directly to the fund. The plan of action activities for the nearest time will be developed, and the assistance to those who are persecuted by the Western countries. It will be an important human rights mechanism for the interests of the Russian community. And of course, the traditional event, St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, is ahead of us. It will be held in St. Petersburg in July, on the 3rd of July to the 6th of July. It will be the 39th forum held on the premises of the Congress Expo Forum. The main topic is as follows: pragmatic dialogue, a way to stable future. It will be held in the conditions of a deep transformation of the global economy and the crisis of globalization. I would like to note that this year the St. Petersburg Forum will become a unique platform for elaboration of practical solutions aimed at stable development, strengthening sovereignty, and forming a just system of global interaction. As you know, this forum unites the leading politicians, business circles, scientists, scholars from all over the world. Our country is an essential participant of the global economic system and open for partnership. The business agenda of the forum covers the major challenges of the modern times. It's about confrontation and cooperation globally. It will be about reorientation, reassembly of the global finance system, transformation of international trade and development of logistics corridors, including trans-Arctic route in the conditions of geopolitical turbulence. A special impetus will be put to the countries of the East and Latin America and Africa. The second area in which the forum's work will be concentrated is the Russian economy. A structural system changes in order to return to the growth trajectory. It will be about a transfer to the new growth model based on technological sovereignty, new industrialization, development of high technology industries, outer space, and other technological areas. It will be also about climate change and the development of regions in our country. Another issue will be technologies, digital sovereignty, artificial intelligence, robotization, big data, cybersecurity, and global conflicts. The second area is social sphere in the era of new technologies. It will regard the personnel as human resources as the basis of stability. Education, supporting family values, and promoting the Russian language. Now, the new quality of life, it will be dedicated to the complex development of regions, urbanistics, the development of the Arctic and the Northern Sea route. The issues of BRICS and the SCO Business Forum, the discussions of the Business 20, Russia-China, Russia-India, Russia-UAE, and Russia-Africa areas, and Small and Medium Enterprises Forum, held under the motto of promoting the growth, implementing artificial intelligence and family entrepreneurship. The Forum of Medical Security, Security of Drugs and Pharmaceuticals will be dedicated to biotechnologies, the creation of new architecture of global healthcare. The Youth Day, the Day of the Future, will be a key space for dialogue between young entrepreneurs and professionals of the future and the digital economy. Traditionally, the Minister of Foreign Affairs actively participates in this forum. We will provide you the schedule of Sergei Lavrov's plans in this forum additionally. I would say now that the top authorities of the officials of the ministry participate in this event. On the 5th of June, Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Pankin will participate in a special thematic Russia APEC session, cooperation prospects up to 2035, and the press departments on the department on the 3rd of July will participate in panel sessions. Words like bullets, how information has been turned into a weapon, and the use of artificial intelligence in the media. I would remind you it's on the 3rd of June. And we will also participate in the digital economy and unification of senses session. And what the Europeans have stolen from themselves and the future generations. And the discussion will be held on the 5th of June with the participation of Foreign Ministry. Cultural code as the basis of new identity and the perspectives. We will form our agenda and we will post it on our resources. So please stay in touch, and we will hold another briefing on the sidelines of the St. Petersburg Forum. Now the relevant global agenda, of course, the situation around Ukraine. We have mentioned at the beginning of the briefing already. The Kiev Nazi regime with the active military
и гражданской инфраструктуры нашей страны. Зеленский бравирует, как он выразился, меткостью ВСУ, публично ставит им новые террористические задачи. Все это происходит вот так, буквально, открыто. Находит живой отклик у его западных союзников, которые прямым текстом призывают киевский режим не сбавлять
college dormitory. 21 people were killed. Another 44 people, mostly students, including 16 minors aged 15, 17, were injured. So that those were mostly young people aged from 15 to 22 years old. It's a monstrous crime. They just sought to literally raze the college to the ground, to kill as many people as possible. Even during rescue efforts, they attempted to attack those who came to the aid of the victims. But that wasn't enough for the Kiev regime. They immediately rushed to add 9 teachers of this educational institution to the meritorious database, that infamous website, accusing them of genocide of the Ukrainian people. Why was that done? In order to distract the Westerners, not to provide that uncomfortable truth for them, but allegedly they attacked those responsible for genocide. So those were actually teachers, the children, students. So the strike was not random, and the drones did not deviate due to electronic warfare systems. Those who ordered the terrorist attack, they were well aware of the consequences of this monstrous attack, that it bore all the characteristics of a war crime. The Zelensky regime enjoys absolute favor from its NATO patrons. They are not guided by any norms like the 1949 Geneva Convention and the additional protocols, and the 1989 Convention on the Rights of the Child, and many others. No, they are not binding on them. The Kiev regime demonstratively ignores them, together with its Western patrons. And those Western curators, they are just glad about such crimes. They provide the green light. And then with their statements, like beastly rhetoric from Western representatives during the UN meeting, when they said allegedly there was no college, no strike against the social side, civilian side. They lied. They just monstrously lied at the UN Security Council. This distortion of the facts by the EU and NATO countries, it's just evident. It's a real carte blanche by NATO and EU leaders. They have provided to Bankova, literally, and supplied them with weapons and money.
The West, the collective West minority, West cannot but recognize that this blood is on their hands, because they are suppliers of weapons, because they are providing targets and they financing structures for Kiev regime, because everything is done against civilians and children. Everything is tantamount and equal to the accomplishment on this. The journalists from 19 countries, 51 in total, who visited Staroblinsk. I will explain why 19 and 20 sometimes, because sometimes we are talking about the journalist points, but they are operating from 19 countries. One journalist was in this team, RT team, but at the same time he is citizens of the other country. That is why we are talking about 20 countries. So the see with their own eyes and talk to the eyewitnesses. During a trip, foreign media representative visited the destroyed dormitory building, examined the ruins of the educational building and nearby buildings. They were shown fragments of Ukrainian UAVs, shells, splinters, elements of the Starlink satellite navigation system, blast craters, and other material evidence of the monstrous crime. The coverage of this incident by this journalist, often contrary to the policies of the editors and the mainstream of Western Russophobic trend, completely disavows the hypocritical ignorance of the bloody crime committed by the Kiev regime. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to deny and silence the atrocities of the Kiev child killers. We will make every possible effort to ensure that the world community knows the truth about the inhuman essence of Zelensky region. Once again, our diplomatic missions will conduct systematic work in order to provide information about this monstrous crime to the international community using every possible methods. So 250 Russian citizens have suffered at the hands of Ukrainian militants over the past week. 199 people were wounded, including 20 children, and 51 civilians were killed. Here are just few facts. Belgorod region, 3 civilians were killed and at least 24 people were injured. Bryansk region from May 21 to 26 as a result of attacks by Bandera followers using drones and multiple rocket launches against civilians. 5 people were killed and at least 6 were injured. DNI from May 21 to 26, 11 people were killed, including 2 children, a girl of 3 years and a boy of 6 years. 4 medics from a team went to help those affected by the shelling. This is a trademark of Kiev terrorists. They strike on civilian facilities and rescues. Zaporozhye region on May 23, a transport workshop of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant was attacked. 8 buses intended for transporting plant personnel were damaged. The residential sector and civilian infrastructure of the satellite city of Energodar are subject to almost continuous daily shelling. Last week, 13 civilians were injured on the region due to the FA attacks, including a man and his daughter who were driving to get flowers for the last school bell, as well as 2 employees of the Russian emergency ministry during the extinguishing of fire. Kursk region, a 67-year-old civilian woman was killed due to a drone attack and 3 people were injured. Rostov region, people were injured, 2 people were injured as a result of missile attack. Samara region, 2 people were killed in the city of Syzran due to UAV attacks. Sevastopol, on the night of May 27, the city was subjected to combined attack by FAU using Western missile, including, according to the preliminary data, Anglo-French Storm Shadow missiles and drones. The building of the Southern Directorate of the Central Bank and 30 residential houses were damaged. A container with explosives dropped from UAV. Kherson region, 5 people were killed and about 20 people injured due to the daily shelling. Russian law enforcement agencies continue to gather evidence to bring the leadership of Kiev regime and the foreign mercenaries to criminal responsibility for the crime committed. The White Yuri Femenyuk, who in March 2022 in Mariupol gave a legal order to shoot a car driven by civilians, resulting in the death of 3 people. He was sentenced in absentia to life imprisonment. Commander Evgeny Markevich, who gave orders for targeting shelling of residential infrastructure in Dinia, And French mercenary Jonathan David Jacques Delport, who fought on the side of the Ukrainian forces, was sentenced to absentia to 15 years in prison. So look at the hatred of the Kiev regime to fight against history and culture, including its culture, and it's a terrible dichotomy. Look, on May 15, we marked the 135th year anniversary of the birth of the great Russian writer Mikhail Bulgakov. The preserved memory of the talented native of Kiev, a master of Russian word, and his unique creative legacy, including in Ukraine, does not give peace to virulent Russophobes and Bandera followers. A photograph appeared online of a defaced sculptured composition featuring characters from the master near the Kiev Museum. And Bulgakov was included as imperial and Ukrainianophobe. This initiative of this move have cut themselves off the legacy of cultural heritage created by this writer, making their cultural world, or rather little world, even poorer. The current director of so-called Institute of National Memory, a former Azov militant, Alexander Alferov, generally considers in his duty to erase from the minds of millions of Ukrainians the slightest mention of which outstanding figures of pan-Russian and world culture lived and worked on the territory of modern Ukraine. He seeks to fill their place in people's mind with odious figures who served Nazi Germany and Hitler personally, of whose talent Alexander Alferov publicly considers himself an ardent admirer. And it's not a coincidence that last week he went to Luxembourg, where he participated in the ceremony we talked about earlier of exhumation and ceremonial transfer to Ukraine for burial of the Kiev Pantheon of outstanding Ukrainians, of the remains of the former Abwehr agent and concurrently one of the leaders of OUN, Andrei Melnik, and his wife Fedak. On May 24, the ashes of Nazi collaborators were entered with the owners of National Military Memorial Ceremony with the participation of Zelensky, former President Viktor Yushchenko, and other proponents of aggressive Ukrainian nationalism. We noticed not big people attended this event. Andrei Melnik has never been a national hero. So-called democratic Europe did not react in any way and just trying to impose its values. And it did not react in any way to posthumous rehabilitation of fascist, although many Europeans were openly outraged by what had happened. At the official level, the rebuttal of Andrei Melnik was condemned in Israel. In its statement, the Israel Foreign Ministry noted the unacceptability of ignoring historical truths and memory of victims killed by Nazis. The Yad Vashem Memorial Complex also expressed serious concerns reminded about Melnik's collaboration with the Hitlerians and the murder of millions of Jews, pointing out that honoring such a leader undermines the moral foundations of preserving the memory of Holocaust victims. In the center of Europe, nowhere, not on the isolated islands, remote territories, or in the deep forest or woods without no humans, in Central Europe, the reburials with the presidential honors in the presence of two persons, the so-called president and the former president of Ukraine, the remnants, reburial of remnants of Nazis, criminal. And We would like to know the reaction of European Parliament about the preparing a resolution with the condemnation. The nuclear mania has long become a distinctive feature of the Zelensky regime. In Ukraine, in its current deplorable state, they are trying to build a national identity, literally on the boats, reburying some and disturbing the remnants of others. Earlier, Zelensky initiated an inventory of the relics of the Orthodox saints. That was the effect, and we will provide the links to our comments when it started. In 2023, the so-called Ministry of Culture of Ukraine confiscated the relics of 3 saints from Chernihiv Holy Trinity Cathedral, Saint Theodorus, Saint Philaret, and Saint Lawrence of Chernihiv. In 2025, an equally blasphemous inventory was carried out on the relics of pan-Russian Orthodox saints of the Kiev Pecherslava. With the aim of checking them for historical and scientific value. The end of quote. The conclusions of the Commission were decided in advance to be classified. The current condition of the relics, as well as their whereabouts, have not been reported. It's obvious that with such satanic action, the neo-Nazis want to deprive the residents of Ukraine of their true history. Instead, they want to improve upon them as idols, fascists, sutures, and other nationalists rebel. It is for this purpose that the remnants are being brought to Ukraine. This is something from the furnace. The Zelensky regime cares absolutely nothing about historical truth. No respect or reverence. The reburial of nationalists is a purely opportunistic act be it the transfer of Melnik's remnants or reburial of those who are the part of nationalistic or neo-Nazist battalions. Their bodies are covered with the swastikas. The opportunistic act aimed at boosting for rapidly falling approval rating and diverting Ukrainian attention from the problems in the country and loud corruption scandals in the government and this monstrous forceful mobilization. And they just trying to present something like similar to ideology, like reburial of the remnants with all the solemn ceremony. Everything was done secretly so that society wouldn't find out. Even reports of the event appeared only the next day after the event. So they did something probably important for the society, but without details, skipping details, because those who still remember the history didn't get despaired. And this is the part, this is just a stream of steps. And this is the attempt to prolong its existence. The Kiev regime needs to cement hatred towards Russia and Russians in the minds of Ukrainians, to instill in Ukrainians the idea of the expediency of continuing hostilities. To these Nazi criminals, whitewashed history is rewritten and the remnants of pseudo-heroes are dug out and reburied. Serving the same purpose are the recently widely circulated historical fantasies by the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, Budanov. He just said, Rus is Ukraine. Rus, repeated Budanov, is much more. Ukraine is the homeland of all of this, even of that which we are fighting against. We, he said, voluntarily gave them a large part of our history and they privatized it. We are he said, we are Rus and we must rule over all of this. End quote. So, what I can say? This is the problem with self-identification. This tells about the lack of the perception. Who are they? This is the search for themselves in the space, not through the culture or history or education. This is the search through the blatant neo-Nazism and through the slaughtering battles. We remember, like Kuchma said, Ukraine is not Russia, but now we see that they think that Ukraine is Rus. So Ukraine is a territory, as they claimed, outside the Russian territory. And now they claim that Ukraine is something bigger, Bodanov says, because they need to rule over Russia. So this is the lack of the understanding of the historic logics, way of history. Everything it depends on the attempts to keep the power through nationalism. This is the thing to rule the peoples. This is the blatant Russophobia through the historically tested Nazism, fascism, and so-called. They are not the first in this. They are trying to put this test on themselves. All Bodanov's statements are very far from the history. This is a primitive insinuations, completely devoid from historical reality about certain ethnic exclusivity of Ukrainian nation compared to other Slavic heroes, and to strengthen the neo-Nazis ideology for revanchism to justify the existence of terrorist quasi-state entity into which Ukraine has become under Zelensky. I try to find a proper word for those who makes these statements. They are moral degenerates. You will never find something like that in historic materials. And at the same time, Kirill Budanov twisted the history, stated that Ukraine, I quote, is the motherland of Rus. I would like to... Please excuse me, this is the quotation is not for the people, it's just for the doctors. They are paid for that. They are deliberately distorting history, like locusts, everything related to the historic facts. Look at what they are doing with the monuments. The Bandera followers tirelessly continue to destroy and desecrate monuments to the true fighters against the brown plague. In the city of Fastov, Kiev region, they dismantle a memorial plaque in honor of Marshal and twice hero of the Soviet Union, Ivan Ignatievich Yakubovsky. I just would like to remind you, in 1943 he commanded the 91st Separate Guards Fastov Tank Brigade, which liberated the city from the Nazis. In Kharkov, they dismantled a commemorative plaque in honor of the hero of the Soviet Union, pilot Sergei Demenkov. In many localities, the Nazis are knocking off the bas reliefs of the order of patriotic war from monuments. But no matter how hard they try, they will not be able to erase the people's memory of those who saved the world from the honor of the fashion. They will never succeed in burying this topic. The above facts confirm the relevance of the facts in denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine and the elimination of threats of emanating from the Ukraine. All these goals will certainly be achieved.
And by the way, today on our website we'll post a link in the text version of today's briefing, and your report on human rights situation in Ukraine was published, prepared by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of our country. It is in Russian and in English. It's about the monstrous systemic human rights violation in Ukraine. It compiled the factual material and eyewitness account, demonstrates total degradation of the human rights situation in Ukraine. The reason is obvious. Ukraine remains under the control of an illegitimate regime that does not hide its neo-Nazi nature, but rather it just imitates its idol, Nazi Germany. So it was that reburial of a Nazi in Ukraine. They used to tell that there are no Nazis in Ukraine, but they have transported the remains of a person considered a collaborationist by the entire world. Its measures against the Russian language and the canonical Orthodox Church in Ukraine. Hitler's collaborators are glorified. Neo-Nazi organizations are fostered at the state level. Those who disagree with the Nazi ideology and practices are intimidated. There was a recent interview by Yulia Mendel, Zelensky's former press secretary, to Tucker Carlson. She told about Zelensky ordering propaganda like Goebbels. So you know what it means, but someone would tell that Yulia Mendel, as a Zelensky press secretary, she has invented it. But I cannot check whether her words are 100% true, but the reburial of a Nazi collaborator with honors of the president level in Ukraine testify that that could be true. That maybe that quotation, it was the exact quotation. And what remains in Ukraine from human rights, as Mendel said, it was Goebbels-like propaganda, but it's total indifference to what is happening in Ukraine. They do not think about citizens, their rights and freedoms. There are no such ideas. They just don't care about the order, the conscience, the morale. They just earn money from blood and deaths, and they're thinking about how to earn even more. And the West continues its weapon supplies to the Zelensky regime. Even more financial flows that would contribute to greater corruption and more crimes. What is the purpose of that? To keep Zelensky and his clique in power. That's what is currently on the minds of the residents of Bankova. Their main concern. They're just ready to sacrifice their country, their people, their history, any memory of the heroes of the past. Western curators will obviously continue to ignore the bloody crimes by Zelensky and push him towards new atrocities. History has already known such examples of the West nurturing evidently Nazi regimes and the bloody trace they have left in history. We have recently remembered that at the events honoring the 81st anniversary of the Great Victory and the Day of Remembrance of the genocide of the Soviet people, we will continue our systematic work to collect evidence and to expose the crimes committed by the Kiev regime, primarily against its own people. We will post a link in the text version of the Today briefing, and I just need to tell about the reaction of international organizations with regard to the terrorist attacks against civilians by the Kiev regime. The UNESCO Secretariat reaction was just shocking. It's not some double standards or some engaged statements, it's just flagrant criminal ignorance. It's a true crime, because this organization its responsibility is to follow what is happening in the sphere of children's rights. And the Ukrainian armed forces attack against Starobersk, which killed, I would remind you, 21 people, 21 children. Over 40 people were seriously injured. More than 60 people were victims of this attack. There was some commentary by the UNESCO press service. The authors of this message, they just ignored the death of children, the death of students. They just briefly noted that according to reports which cannot be verified due to the lack of access to the territory of UN representatives, the strike resulted in the deaths of civilians. Full stop. So in the UNESCO Secretariat, you cannot be unaware that it's about children who have names, who have dates of birth, and unfortunately one date of death for each of them. You cannot be unaware of that. It's about a strike against a college, because it's mentioned by the witnesses, the media outlets all over the world. It's mentioned by Russian government agencies. And the Russian permanent representative at UNESCO has personally informed you about that. Different aspects of this tragedy and details. But instead of expressing condolences that just need to be expressed in this situation, the UNESCO Secretariat officials just did not express any condolences at all. They just did not tell anything the relatives and of those killed. And Kiev was not only supported by UNESCO Secretariat, but also there were promises of assistance in assessing the damage and determining urgent measures. So when 21 children were killed, damage should not be determined, and their families, according to UNESCO, they should not be supported. In response strikes against Kiev, UNESCO did not need any clarification, any expertise. They did not need that. They just present it as a fact. The violation of UNESCO's mandate, which does not include the issues of security, territorial integrity, or sovereignty. This statement begins with the words, that the context for the incident was, as they say, the escalation of the war in Ukraine following the invasion by the Russian Federation, end of quote. So, in any message regarding the situation in Ukraine, just tell about anti-constitutional coup d'etat, the financing of Kiev terrorist regime by the West, contrary to their own obligations not to supply weapons into the zone of conflict. That political support and militarization just mention further those initial root causes of the conflict. It's not double standards, it's criminal ignorance and manipulation with its own mandate. And actually, it's an attempt to somehow justify those who have committed a terrorist attack against civilians. It's criminal. They could not just ignore another crime by the Kiev regime, which killed 21 people, mainly children, because it directly concerns the UNESCO scope. You cannot turn a blind eye to that, and it's about the killing of minors, but they have managed that, and we will open their blind eyes. In order for them not to find themselves in the zone of their criminal comfort. They will not manage to do that. Such pandering to the criminal Kiev regime is unacceptable. Violating the principle of equidistance damages the prestige of international officials, international organization. Actually, nothing has remained from the prestige of UNESCO. They have issued a report on the killings of journalists, but there were no Russian names there. Now they have just ignored the killings of children, and then the killings of those who have tried to rescue children from the debris. It's not just engaged position, it's just supporting those who commit those terrorist attacks. We demand that the UNESCO Secretariat strictly adhere to its obligations and the status of international humanitarian organization. In some days it will be the 1st of June, the International Children's Day. In our country, is marked in accordance with our political priorities. The Convention on the Rights of the Child, that is still relevant, 30 years of its existence, and one of the main tasks is the protection of children, care of minors for any state. However, in this sphere, there are immense challenges and problems: hunger, lack of access to health care, violence, and terrorist attacks against children. Children's issues are politicized totally. Double standards are promoted. Some countries are unscrupulously exploiting the emotional side of the issue. It's lies and slander against other states. There is also an issue of the so-called kidnapped children, kidnapped by Russia. It's invented by the Ukrainian regime, and this myth is being promoted on all international platforms, and they're just glad to hear that and do not check the facts. However, they ignore the fact that the reunification of children is conducted from the very beginning of a special military operation. There are contacts with Kiev, with the assistance of the Vatican, Qatar, the International Committee of the Red Cross. In October 2025, the US First Lady Melania Trump actually actively joined those efforts. 30 children from 22 families have been returned, and 141 minors from 114 families have been reunited with their parents. The fourth bulletin of the Commissioner for Children's Rights, Maria Zakharova, has been published and translated into English and posted on the Children's Ombudsman's website. We will post the links in the text version of the Today briefing. There is a unified list of 339 allegedly wanted Ukrainian children. We have received that list during the talks in June 2025 in Istanbul. Apart from that, we have not received anything. This number, 339, it has never been voiced by Kiev regime. They invented other numbers invented by them. Thousands, then maybe millions, then 10,000, 15,000 children. No, we have been presented the list of 339 children names. A significant part of them is irrelevant. So we urge everyone to study that information that is contained in the bulletin of the Presidential Commissioner for Children's Rights. Unfortunately, this conflict has affected children a lot. Those problems connected with children started to be discussed starting from 2022, unfortunately. And before that, allegedly, they have never had any problems connected with children, but by the time there was the Angels Alley and those statements that the Donbas children will live in cellars while other children will live well. No, back then no one mentioned those problems of children. However, from 2014 to February 2022, at least 129 children were killed in the territories of the LPR and the DPR. But those victims were not mentioned back then. Because the youngest victim of the Ukrainian aggression was only 27 days old on the day of her death. And the Tornado and Aidar forbidden battalions tortured and abused minors in Donbass. In one of the schools of Lysychansk, there was a torturing chamber. Children were tortured and filmed, and there was also the orphan girls transported to the Aidar battalion fighters for abuse and violence. You understand that? And it has all the characteristics of genocide. There are numerous hateful statements by Ukrainian leaders. The former Prime Minister Yatsenyuk called the Donbass militia subhumans. It's a direct quotation, similar to the Nazi Untermenschen. And President Petro Poroshenko, it is his expression that children will be sitting in basements and cellars, and it's a direct quote. He's calling it his country, but he just voiced many statements like subhumans and so on. and which citizens he considers the citizens of his country, and which citizens he considers some other country's citizens. It's not clear, but that anti-humane logic is just filled his brains. He calls civilians subhumans. Actually, the Western countries, they just pumped Ukraine with weapons. It was supplied in such a scale we have even no idea, because there was no controlling organization that was fixed those supplies.
И расползалось, и растекалось.
It was just a river, spreading everywhere. This weapon is used against Russian regions, including the youngest residents. All those who supply weapons to Ukraine become accomplices in crimes, including those against children. Just several crimes. The attack on the center of the pre-holiday Belgorod on December 30th, 2023, when shelling of a New Year snow town, Christmas tree and ice rink killed 25 people, including 5 children, and over 100 civilians were wounded. Comparable in its deliberate cruelty was Atakam's missile attack strike on the Uchukuyevka beach in Sevastopol on June 23, 2024, where many families were relaxing on Saturday afternoon. 153 civilians were injured, including 27 children. 4 people were killed, including 2 children aged 2 and 9. Unfortunately, there are many similar examples. Another testament to these atrocities of Kiev regime, on November 2025, near Konstantinovka, of the rector of the Church of the Royal Martin, his wife and family, with a child who had taken shelter in the church. When they tried to leave the shelter and head towards Russian positions, hoping for rescue, they were spotted by UAVs. The path of salvation turned into a death trap. As a result, 7 people died, including the 8-year-old child. Moreover, Ukrainian Nazis did not allow fellow villagers to retrieve the bodies of the deceased for burial, opening the fire each time. So they do not allow to bury. They are engaged in a reburial of their own Nazis. On the night of December 31st, 2025, the Ukrainian forces carried out the targeted drone strike on a cafe and hotel in the village of Hortly, Kherson region. 29 people were killed, including 2 children, many burned alive. 31 people were injured, including 5 minors. On May 22nd of this year, they attacked the academic building and dormitory in Starobilsk College. There were 86 children in the age between 14 to 19. More than 30 people were injured. 21 were killed, all of them ordinary students, children in fact. The rescue operation lasted 45 hours, and the danger of further strikes, repeated strikes by Ukrainians, was announced 15 times. We were telling this to the 51 foreign journalists who were not afraid of to honestly fulfill their journalistic duty and come to the crime scene recorded for the indisputable fact. And they see that it's not headquarters or storage of ammunition. This is just a children educational institution where children were the Zelensky regime also does not leave alone the children who found safety on Russian territory. Ukrainian so-called volunteers and activists persecute foster families. And children who live in these families are blackmailed or intimidated, including through threats of organizing a child's kidnapping or escape. They also involve in teenagers in illegal activities. They trained with calls and messages to harm them. They put information in internet about fast money, quick earnings, and then they look for those who will be engaged in other dangerous activities or socially dangerous acts. Deception and forgery are also used to induce them into unlawful acts, such as sending fake photos, and they make children to commit other criminal activities. And they also send fake photos of law enforcement officer documents. They intimidate. There is also a system of recruiting school children via social network. Children are offered money and manipulated to obtain information. There is evidence that Ukraine, through the internet, is drawing children into games that can lead to death. Another fact of deliberate terror of the Kiev regime is the posting of personal data of Russian citizens, including minors aged 2 to 17, including website Mirotvorets. According to media outlets that monitor the activities of this resource, in 2025, over 100 minors from Russia, other countries like Belarus, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Israel, Moldova, posted there. They are accused of encroachment of the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Another 25 children aged 2 to 3, just imagine, appeared in this site database. As rightly noted by Deputy Chairperson of the State Duma of the Federal Assembly of Russia, co-chair of Parliamentary Commission, Madam Kuznetsova, Kiev regime violated all possible articles of the convention. This refers to killings and illegal transfer and non-return from abroad, child trafficking. So information received by the Parliamentary Commission testifies to the criminal acts of the Kiev regime against minors on the territory of Russia, as well as a systematic and mass violation of children's rights in Ukraine. And Kishinev Chisinau regime is also good in this. It's quite clear that they are so far, but using the array, they are quite close to that. The release of the book Gutsul Case, Anatomy of the Political Persecution, is legitimately elected Bashkan of the Gagauz Autonomous Region of the Republic of Moldova, is causing growing resonance in the media. The publication of the collection has become an event that reveals to the true essence of the regime. This is a unique documentary manifesto created in a cell of Chisinau prison number 13. It is based on 30 personal letters by Gutsul addressed to her husband, children, mother, politicians, and so on. One of the letters is addressed to President Putin. It states, "It was a shock for me to realize that someone can come and punish you for what you grew up with, for the Russian language, for the memory of victory, for the Our Father in Russian, for everything that has been part of your life since birth." In her address to the world, Gutsul vividly and uncompromisingly paints a picture of the immersion of once agrarian republic into the abyss of political lawlessness. She writes about the growing conflict between Gagauzia region and central authorities, about the creation of the climate of suspicion, and her election as a leader and her consistent defense of the region's autonomy that became a crime for the Chisinau regime, a crime requiring no proof. So, having been incarcerated for nearly 300 days, the author details humiliating conditions of detention, psychological pressure, and information campaign waged against her by pro-government media. A recurring theme in the text is the idea that the prosecution of the people's elected leader is closely linked to the defense of friendly ties with Russia. Let me remind you that despite Gutsul's categorical denial of guilt, Chisinau court sentenced her to 7 years in prison in August 2025. The process was accompanied by numerous violations. Judicial investigation was conducted formally, and requests for interrogation of 170 witnesses ready to confirm her innocence were rejected without any clear explanation. She also wrote to members of the European Parliament. I quote, "Today I'm a political prisoner of main Sandu regime, a regime that calls itself pro-European and claims to protect European values. We are all these European human rights defenders," end quote. The actions of Moldovan authorities led by Romanian citizen Maria Sandu are not just a disgrace, but a real calamity for the country and its people. We regard the publication of this book as an important step forward upholding the truth. We continue to use this entire arsenal of diplomatic means to draw the attention of the international community to the ongoing lawlessness and protect the legitimate rights. And it's available in many languages, in Russian, English, and Turkish. And as the author quotes, "It's not a confession or memories. It is living proof on indomitable will and truth." Now let's move to other regions. On May 20th of this year, the official Gazette of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria published a law on the criminalization of French colonialism. This completed the process of preparing and adoption this document, initiated in 2025. The law entails the recognition of French colonialism of Algeria from 1830 to 1962 as a state crime with no statute of limitations. Specifically, it lists specific offenses falling under this category, including international killings, the use of military force against civilians, the use of prohibited types of weapons, and others. France is required to eliminate the consequences of nuclear and chemical tests on Algerian territory, provide detailed information about them, and pay compensation to the victims. Criminal liability is provided for the denial, propaganda, and glorification of French colonial acts in Algeria. We support the decisive action of Algeria, which has experienced the full weight of French oppression, aimed at providing a fair and comprehensive assessment of the period of Western colonial expansion. Algeria's principled and consistent position on this crucial issue is also confirmed by the active participation of the representative in the work of the Forum of Supporters of Combating Modern Practices of Neocolonialism for the Freedom of Nessus. Chagos, we continue to monitor the situation there. We continue to closely monitor the situation there. Back in 2019, the International Court of Justice recognized London's continued control over the archipelago as illegal. By the way, Russia supported the claim, but the British reluctantly began to meet Mauritius halfway on this issue. Even this step was made with great reservation, and only when the other parties, political parties, came to power on the Albion. But then situation changed. It suddenly turned out that White House was not satisfied with such self-activity on London's part, and for the inhabitants of Downing Street, dependent on the opinion of their older brother across the ocean, this turned out to be more important than caring for the reputation of or fulfilling already assumed obligations. Let's not be ignorant and naive. Many English ruling circles were glad of such a rebuke from Washington. As a result, in London they again began to stall the process. The ratification process in the parliament slowed down, and then the legislative session came to an end. As you remember, we spoke about this recently on April 13 of this year. Deputy head of the Foreign Office, Stephen Doughty, effectively confirmed to the House of Commons leaks in the media about the indefinite suspension of the ratification. These tactics, by the way, is often used by the British to talk out domestic political problems. They create commissions, committees, some kind of independent investigation are so-called launched that go on for many years, allowing them to let off steam, but rarely lead to improvements. And it has nothing to do with the law. We hope that in this case they will not be able to sweep the matter under the rug. After all, not only international law but also the sympathies of the world community are on the side of Mauritius, but the moral of the story is obvious.
Разобещали. Властелины слова захотели, дали, захотели, забрали обратно. Даже если за дело берется премьер-министр, ну вот в частности Британии, у которого все регалии юриста, ну и так далее, это ничего не